April 30th, and it is another beautiful sunny spring day here in Cleveland. It is 8:30 in the morning, and it is 50 degrees, and I'm loving it. This is what I love about Ohio: the change of seasons, the different weather. Just the weather changes here all the time. There's a joke that, if you don't like the weather that we have right now in Cleveland, wait 15 minutes and it will change, and that's completely true. But I like it. I like variety. And I want to talk to you today about moving to another state. If you have a dream of moving to another state, do it. Why do I say this? Is because I had a dream of moving to Arizona back in the 90s. I was determined to move to Arizona. And it took a while. It took me a few years to save the money and find an opportunity to do it. But in 2002, I moved to Arizona. And I lived out there for a little over, well, I basically lived out there for about 11 years. I moved back to Ohio shortly to be with who is now my wife, but we both moved out there together to Arizona. And I can tell you the one thing that it did for me was I got to see another part of the country that I had never seen before. I had seen Arizona. I had been there a few times, but it gave me the opportunity to see a whole different culture within our own culture. The Southwest is an entirely different environment than the Midwest. Different mindset, different people. For instance, here in Cleveland, there's a lot of black people. There's lots of African American people. I would say the Cleveland city proper is probably 60% black, something like that. And when I moved out west, it was mostly white people and Hispanics and Mexicans. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Mexicans. I don't know if that's considered slandering Hispanic people, but they were Mexican people because there were a lot of illegals that worked in all the shops and stuff, and you got to see a whole new culture. It was nothing like you hear about on the news. The news would tell you that all the Mexicans that are coming over the border are bad people. That's how Trump portrays it. That's how DHS and all these people are telling you that they're all bad people, but we didn't see that. We saw friendly, happy people. They were happy to be in the country. They were working at the coffee shops and the fast food restaurants. They were washing cars and cutting grass and trimming trees, and they were happy to do it. Friendly. I never had neither my wife and I ever had any issues with the Hispanic people out in Arizona. But I noticed that there were no black people in Arizona. And I remember the first time I saw a black guy, I almost gave him a hug. Seriously, because like here in Cleveland, this is just my opinion, but I think the black people add a certain spice to our culture here. They have their own way of living, their own music that all the white people have stolen from them, of course. We've tried to steal the rap music, but it hasn't really quite taken off for the white folks. But black people add color and flair and excitement and just a certain something that's missing in the white culture. And out west, you got to see a whole different mindset. It was a modern infrastructure. All the roads were laid out in a grid. You didn't have curves in the road. The freeways were set up differently. The freeways here in Cleveland, if you want to hit an on-ramp, most of the on-ramps here, you have to go up the on-ramp to get onto the freeway above the road. There, all the on-ramps were downhill, so you could get up to speed and get up to 75 miles an hour and merge into traffic. But I'm not going to go over the differences between here and Arizona. The point is when I lived out west, not only did I get to see a different culture and a different way of life, I grew as a person. I really did. I really grew as a person. I got to explore. I got to do things that, you couldn't do in Ohio. You can't just jump in your car in Ohio and drive to California. I went to California a few times, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, went all over the place, went to Vegas, Nevada. You got to travel, you got to experience a different mindset, a different attitude, a different belief system. The city we lived in, Chandler, was founded by Mormons. Chandler and Gilbert, there was a high population of Mormons. I had no idea. I didn't know this part of the country, this state, was founded by a group of Mormons. I mean, I went to school in high school with a few guys and gals that were Mormon and went to the local Mormon church, but we didn't know anything about what they did behind closed doors in their church. We'd heard rumors about magical underwear and stuff like this. We kidded this guy Dwayne about it. He was Mormon. He took it well. It wasn't meant to be malicious. But when you get to step outside of your comfort zone and live in a different place and a different mindset, what is this guy doing? Is he turning into the garage? I guess he is. You get to experience the world from a whole new viewpoint. And what it did for me was, number one, I felt grateful that I got to do this. I felt so grateful, and I'll never forget the day that I arrived in Arizona after driving across the country for 4 days. And I arrived at my apartment that I was renting, and I was just like, yeah, I did it. I did it all by myself. I didn't do it with the assistance of anyone. I didn't, have a parent or a sibling or a mentor that helped me fund it. I funded it myself. I drove myself. I did it without getting killed. It was this great feeling of satisfaction that I actually accomplished this major undertaking. It's a major undertaking to move across the country. It's a huge undertaking. I planned it all myself. I planned the finances. I hired the movers. I got my stuff packed. I found an apartment. I found a job. This is back when you could find a job pretty easily, too. And it's not like today where you gotta almost get on your knees and service someone orally just to have a job. It was a great feeling of satisfaction. It was a great feeling I had this feeling of awakening. It really was a huge thing. And the first couple of years I lived out there, I was in heaven. I was in absolute heaven. And after a while, the sunny skies of Arizona are so different than Ohio. My goal was to get the hell out of Ohio, get away from the gray skies and the cold and the fat people and the cigarette smoking and all of the beer-swilling hillbillies that live around here, and I had learned to despise and hate and all that stuff. But after a couple of years of being in that constant sunshine and the constant blue skies, I know it sounds weird, but I began to hate it. It began to eat away at me, and I began to curse the sun. There was never any clouds. It never rained. You couldn't tell winter, spring, and summer they all blended together. It was all the same. Every day was the same. It was a Groundhog Day every day. And I began to detest the traffic, and the people were mean. They weren't friendly. Like Midwesterners were all friendly. You walk past somebody in the park, and we say hi to each other. We try to let each other out in traffic, in the business districts and around the shopping malls. Out there, nobody would let you out. It was a competition to see how long they could keep you sequestered into the parking lot. They wouldn't let you merge into traffic on the 10 or on the 202 or the 101 or the 60. People played a game with you on the freeways. They wouldn't let you change lanes. They would speed up and slow down to block you in, things like that. So it began to really eat away at me. It began to really gnaw at me, and I began to miss Ohio a great deal. I began to miss the rain. I began to miss the trees. There's no trees out west. There are trees, but they're not like trees here. They're not like oak trees and maple trees and birch trees and all the trees, the beautiful, beautiful trees here in Ohio and in the Midwest. There were no squirrels. There were no chipmunks. There were scorpions and rattlesnakes. There were no rose bushes. There were prickly pear cactuses, which are, if you ever try to prune a prickly pear, make sure you're wearing like full leather garments and an asbestos suit, unless you want to be covered in these tiny little prickers. And I began to yearn for Ohio again. And what it did for me is it gave me a new appreciation and a new love for where I came from, which is Ohio. And I began to seek the thing that I couldn't find out west were these greasy little spoons, these little diners, the family-owned places with the cracked red vinyl seats, bottomless cups of coffee, and a waitress that would call you hun. That wasn't out there. And then we found this place called the Village Inn, which is owned by a big conglomerate, big corporation that runs places like Poppin' Fresh and Applebee's and stuff. And there was a waitress there that was like from the Midwest, and she was just, she was kind of like an old barmaid, but in a restaurant. She and I and my wife, we all kind of became friends, and we gave her Christmas cards. We gave her huge tips. We loved her. She called you hun, and I said, you know what, this woman, please don't hit me, Blue Rhino. Oh, Lord, help me, please, Jesus. This lady was one reason that made me want to move back to Ohio. And I tell you what, the point of the story is Arizona gave me a new love and a new appreciation for the state I ran away from. It gave me a new appreciation for rain and snow and people of all walks of life. There's all kinds of people here in Ohio. There's Hispanic and Asian and black and white and Catholic and Italian and Jewish. There's no Jewish people. I couldn't find any Jewish people in Arizona. It was all white Mormons. There were very few Catholics. I grew up with Catholics. Catholics are everywhere around here. Jewish people to the east side just crawling with Catholics and Jewish people. More Catholics live on the west side than on the east side. But out there, it just seemed to be these white milquetoast Mormons living their white milquetoast lives. I don't know. And what it did is help me grow as a person, because it made me realize that be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And I was determined. I was hell-bent, like I am with most things, but I was hell-bent on moving to Arizona. And I did enjoy it. I did enjoy some of it, but it gave me a brand new appreciation. Now that I'm back here, I can look back in those days in Arizona and see how I grew. I went out there a caterpillar, and I came out a butterfly, because I grew as a person. I began to see the errors of my ways. I found forgiveness towards my parents out there. I grew as an artist. I wrote all kinds of music that I otherwise wouldn't have written if I stayed here. I met all kinds of people and musicians. I began to realize, everybody out west is gorgeous. Most of the people out there are skinny. They don't smoke. They drive nice cars. They are clean cut. Lots of luxury vehicles in the valley. At least there were when we were there. And you begin to kind of detest these people, because it's a very self-indulgent, narcissistic society out west. People don't care about each other. There was a guy who got knocked off his motorcycle on the 10 during morning rush hour traffic, and I listened to this radio station out there. I think it was 5:50 a.m. and people were calling into the radio station complaining that this guy who was dying in the middle of the freeway, who had been knocked off his bike, they were mad at him because he was making them late for work. And this is not, I'm not even exaggerating that. That's what the guy, the DJ said on the radio. It's just a different culture. So I'm so glad to be back here. And I would suggest you do, if you're thinking of moving to another part of the state, if you've had a dream of going to California or Florida or the Carolinas or Texas, a lot of people are moving to all these places right now. I would suggest you try it. But get ready for culture shock. Because if you grew up here in the Midwest like I did, I learned to appreciate myself out there. I realized that I was a small town kid. I grew up in a small town of maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people. Everybody knew each other. We watched out for each other. We watched each other's homes when other people go on vacation. I knew